want to discuss Zimbabwe's minerals. There is a myth that says Africa is a poor continent. This is a myth which arises from the propaganda generated by people from the West who present Africa as the poorest continent in the world. This actually is not correct. The truth is that Africa is the richest continent in the world. And we have been discussing in other lectures the implications of Africa being the richest continent, the problems that arise from that, the fact that Africa has been presented as a poor continent in order to use it as a source of wealth. Now, today we want to specifically focus on Zimbabwe, which belongs to the southern region called SADC, and SADC is the richest region in terms of what are called strategic minerals. So we belong to that region of the world which is associated with natural resources, the largest reserves of natural resources, and natural resources of a rare nature, natural resources of a strategic nature. Zimbabwe has been described as the richest nation in terms of natural resources per person. This was said by a Zimbabwean patriot who is based at Harvard University. His name is Garikai Chengu. He's a researcher, and he has said Zimbabwe is the richest nation in respect of natural resources per person, especially those resources that are still untapped. There's very little exploration going on in Zimbabwe and many parts of Africa, and so we don't know too much about what we have, but an assessment has been made that we could be the richest nation in the world in terms of natural resources per person. And what that means is that if you have to sell all the minerals that we have in the country, and you do the same for all the other countries that have natural resources, the amount of money you get from those natural resources, you divide it equally among the people of the country. Zimbabweans would be the richest on earth. Now, that is a position to envy, and that is a position from which you should assess the relationship of the country with other countries, because international politics is basically a function of what you have in form of natural resources and how the other countries relate to you in terms of the benefits they accrue from the resources you have. So we in Africa must always know that, must remember that we hold a special position in the world because of the natural resources that are concentrated in our part of the world. Zimbabwe has been assessed to be the richest source of diamonds. In fact, the largest reserve of diamonds are here in Zimbabwe. And you have minerals like chrome. Bartholomew says Zimbabwe is the largest reserve of chrome, and we have the second largest reserve of platinum. We have the largest reserve of asbestos, and our asbestos happens to be the best quality, the best type of asbestos, the least hazardous type of asbestos. So we have the largest reserve of a type of asbestos called chrysotile, which is the least hazardous in the world. We have the largest reserve of mtorolite, and mtorolite is a mineral which is unique to Zimbabwe. Mtorolite, it is a beautiful green stone that is found on the Great Dyke, and it is found where you find Zimbabwean chrome, and it's only found in Zimbabwe. We are the largest reserve of methane gas, and when I say largest reserve, I mean largest reserve in sub-Saharan Africa. that is Africa south of the Sahara, and not in the world. Methane gas is a product which we use to produce electricity, and we also produce fertilizer from it. And our largest reserve of methane gas is in Lupani, in Hwange, and there are reports that we have a lot of methane gas in Chimanimani. We have a lot of iron ore. In fact, it is estimated that we are the largest reserve of iron ore in the world. Now, if you look at the minerals I have mentioned, diamonds, platinum, chrome, asbestos, methane gas, iron ore, where we basically lead the world in terms of reserves, you begin to appreciate the fact that we are a uniquely rich country. The size of the country is very small. We are under 400,000 square kilometers. But we lead the world in terms of the reserves of those minerals that we have mentioned. I would want to also mention that apart from these very important minerals that we have in large amounts, we are a country with over 67 minerals that have been identified. And these minerals, some of them fall in the rank of strategic minerals. Now, strategic minerals are those minerals which are very important in defense industries of the world, in commercial industries. Chrome being one of those, platinum being one of those, manganese being one of those. Rare earth minerals, we have what are called rare earth minerals. All those are concentrated in Southern Africa. South Africa is a major source of rare earth minerals. But of course, they're not the largest reserve. China is. But the countries of Southern Africa, from South Africa to the DRC, are the reserve of rare earth minerals. DRC is a very important country with resources such as coltan. And coltan is the mineral from which you make the product which you use to make cell phones. DRC is the major source of that mineral. Cobalt, all those come from the DRC. So this region, you know, as Southern Africa Development Community, is the major source of strategic minerals. That makes our region special. And I think in other lectures I've indicated to you why this region, Southern Africa, had to go to war in order to be independent. It is one region where the colonizers refused to grant independence free of charge. They said they were not going to give us independence because they considered the value they derived from our country. So we are forced to go to war in order to be independent because of the minerals that we have. Look at diamonds. If we have to look at some of these minerals individually. The World Diamond Council, which is based in Belgium. In fact, Mark van Boschel, an official of the World Diamond Council, came here in 2011, and he basically gave us information in respect of how much we have in terms of diamonds. He indicated that Zimbabwe was the largest reserve of diamonds, and that in fact, there are areas that he mentioned. He said from Marange to Chimanimani, there is 70 kilometers of kimberlites. Those are diamonds that are underground, where you find pipes in which diamonds are found. And then he also highlighted the fact that the largest concentration of kimberlites in this country are found between Chiredzi and Mwenezi. This is the area where recent press reports have indicated there are diamonds in Chibi. I think this is just confirmation of what Boschel was saying. Last week, the newspapers were indicating that diamonds have been found in an area called Sese in Chibi. that is not surprising because we already knew that that's where you find the largest concentration of diamonds in this country. Then you have kimberlites in Matabele North, the area between Victoria Falls and Hwange, the area you know as the Horn of Zimbabwe. There you find 4 kimberlites. And in Cholocho, the district in Mats North, you find 4 kimberlites also. And then in the Kariba Dam, under the water, there are 3 kimberlites. In Beatrice, that area between, on your way from Harare to Chivu, they say there are 2 kimberlites there. But this is just to highlight some of the areas where it has been confirmed that we could be having diamonds. But Pan-Africa Canada, which is an organization based in Canada, which is not very friendly to Zimbabwe. In fact, it hates Zimbabwe. It went on a campaign a few years ago to demonize Marange diamonds because they wanted to make sure that the diamonds from Marange were not allowed to be marketed, to be put on the international market as part of the sanctions against the country. But in their hatred, Pan-Africa Canada confirmed that Zimbabwe is a country full of diamonds. They say, theoretically, you can find diamonds anywhere in Zimbabwe because Zimbabwe is a special rock called the Zimbabwe Archean Craton, which lies underground, and it covers most of the underground of the country. And they indicate that this rock called the Zimbabwe Archean Craton, which actually is the reason why we have diamonds almost everywhere, starts from the northeast of the country to Matabele and south. And then it extends all the way to the west into Botswana. And so it has its tail end in Botswana. And that's why, of course, Botswana is the largest producer of diamonds in the world. They get them from the Zimbabwe Archean Craton, which is an extension of the main rock that sits in Zimbabwe. You also should understand that on the border between Zimbabwe and Botswana, there is a rock called the Orapa Kimberlite Track. And they say this Orapa Kimberlite Track, which straddles the border between the two countries, it has got some of the largest concentrations of diamonds in the world. And therefore, on the border between Zimbabwe and South Africa, we should be able to find a lot of diamonds eventually, because that's where you find a very large concentration of diamonds or of kimberlites. And in fact, it is suspected that in that part of the country, we may find very strange diamonds with different colors like blue and so on and so on. So you guys should be prepared to be confounded by a lot of wealth that will come from diamonds fairly soon after sufficient exploration has been made. So, being one of the richest countries in terms of diamonds, we should look forward to a very healthy future. Some facts indicate that 81% of the diamonds of the world come from Africa. In fact, Africa produces 81% of the world's diamonds. Now, in the next few years, Zimbabwe is expected to be the largest producer of diamonds. And when Zimbabwe is in full production of diamonds, we will be producing the 50% of 81% of diamonds in Africa. So we will be producing 50% of African contribution to the diamond industry. That is not a small contribution. It is also given in other statistics that Zimbabwe will be producing 30% of the world's diamonds in terms of volume, in terms of the volume of diamonds that we will contribute to the world is about 30%. But in terms of value of these diamonds, we will be contributing 25%. Now, these statistics are important for you to assess how important we are as a source of diamonds. And diamonds are very important to the world because there's a gem diamond, which was, of course, used to produce the rings and other decorative items for the rich. And also, diamonds are used to produce other material which is used to break down hard surfaces, hard rocks, and things like that. Industrial diamond. Botswana currently is the largest producer of gem diamonds. It produces industrial diamonds. But clearly, because our exploration in terms of diamonds is not yet complete, we don't know to what extent we have gem diamond and industrial diamond. But that information should be coming in due course. Marange, which is the headquarters of alluvial diamonds in the world, is of course a place you know very well. But alluvial diamonds are those diamonds that you find in gravel, that you find in sand, and virtually on the topsoil. It is those diamonds which you can extract very cheaply. You don't have to use sophisticated equipment. And since Zimbabwe has been mining alluvial diamonds in Marange, it is quite possible that we may be coming to the end of exploitation of alluvial diamonds, because if you have alluvial diamonds, you can exploit them very fast and exhaust them very fast. So although we are the largest reserve of alluvial diamonds in Marange, it's not a resource we should continue to believe will be there for long. But we are lucky that most of our diamonds are kimberlite. And in order to exploit those kimberlite diamonds, you need to go down the earth, and it's more expensive to do that. So diamonds are very important in history. You know that Cecil Rhodes became very rich out of diamonds. And of course, he also got very rich out of gold mining. It is Cecil John Rhodes who formed the company you know as De Beers. De Beers is a very old company, over 100 years old, and it grew so big that it swallowed all the other competitors in the region, and it became a monopoly. And for the last 1 century and over, De Beers has been the company to exploit diamonds in Africa. So you go to any country in Africa, you will find De Beers is the miner and the trader in diamonds. From South Africa, Namibia, Botswana, DRC, you go up north, all the way, Sierra Leone and places, it's De Beers. And because De Beers has been a monopoly over diamond mining and diamond trading, there came a time when they were actually able to determine the price of diamonds by simply regulating the amount of diamonds you get on the markets. If the De Beers thought that the price of diamonds had gone too low, they would decide to remove some of the diamonds from the market in order to create a shortage. And if there's a shortage, the price goes up. And if it goes too high, then De Beers would add more diamonds on the market to stabilize the price. And so that's how they have been dealing with diamonds in the last 1 century. The important thing here is that that monopoly is now threatened by Zimbabwe. All along, the world did not know that Zimbabwe is the largest reserve of diamonds. And we only got to know that this is the case after 2000. In fact, around 2006, when Marange diamonds were discovered. And before then, in fact, government, the new government of Zimbabwe, the independence government, had told De Beers to get out of Zimbabwe. They didn't want De Beers to continue mining in Zimbabwe. I don't know for what reason they did that, but De Beers is no longer allowed to operate in the country from independence onwards. But that alone threatened De Beers' monopoly, because De Beers knew that Zimbabwe was the largest reserve of diamonds. And when the ZANU-PF government decided to chuck them out of the country, they basically started a campaign to have ZANU-PF government removed from power in order for them to facilitate takeover of government by a more friendly party which would allow them to come back to control the largest reserve of diamonds. What you find happening in Zimbabwe, where the West and other Western companies alleging that the Zimbabwe government is not democratic and therefore must be removed from power, the main reason is that ZANU-PF as a liberation movement is not trusted by the West. And as long as ZANU-PF is in charge of the country, this rich country, these Western countries may have a problem accessing the very rare and strategic resources that are in the country. So diamonds are a mineral which De Beers would want to continue to control as a monopoly. And if they are prevented from doing that by a government, obviously they will work to remove that government from power. Now, this is very important because it clearly indicates to you that what you see as politics may in fact be economics. What you see as democracy, or what is interpreted as democracy in some cases, is actually a cover to maintain interests in terms of control of the natural resources. And I've just given you a good example of De Beers and its behavior in respect of the ZANU-PF government. The attempts by Western countries to remove ZANU-PF from power in order to be able to control the diamonds and other natural resources is what you know as international politics. And then you also find that some countries like Canada, like Australia, which are producers of diamonds, their diamonds are kimberlite, and kimberlite diamonds are very expensive to exploit. You need a lot of money to go down there to exploit the diamonds. So it costs money to produce kimberlite diamonds. Meanwhile, Zimbabwe's diamonds are alluvial, the Marange diamonds, which cost virtually very little money to exploit. So when the diamonds from Marange go on the international market to compete with diamonds from Australia and Canada, there is obviously a problem that is created because Marange diamonds can be sold for very little but making a profit, while Canada and Australian diamonds have to be sold at a particular figure much higher in order for them to make a profit. So you find countries like Canada and Australia making a lot of noises about the diamonds of Marange being blood diamonds and so on, when in actual fact their main objective is to make sure that they are diamonds that do not find stiff competition on the international market. That's our diamonds. You go to platinum. I indicated that Zimbabwe is only the second largest reserve of platinum. It's not the largest reserve of platinum. South Africa is the largest reserve of platinum. South Africa has been exploiting its platinum for a very long time. We have not. We only started a few years ago. So in fact, in terms of untapped resources of platinum, we are not a small contributor in terms of the future production of platinum. Platinum is a strategic mineral like chrome, and Zimbabwe is the second largest reserve. But also, we must know that platinum is a rare mineral. Apart from being strategic, it is a rare mineral. And when we talk about platinum, we're not talking about one mineral. Because where you find platinum, you find a group of minerals which are related, which are called platinum group metals. And so where you find platinum, you find 5 other related minerals. And these are palladium, iridium, rhodium, ruthenium, osmium. And platinum is the 6th. These are PGMs, platinum group metals. They are rare minerals. They are strategic minerals, all of them. They are rare minerals in the sense that you don't find platinum in many countries. As far as I know, there are only 5 countries in which you find platinum. South Africa is the largest reserve, Zimbabwe is the second largest reserve, Russia the 3rd largest reserve, and then you have Canada and the United States with small amounts of platinum. And if you exhaust exploitation of platinum in these 5 countries, you have no platinum left in the world. That should indicate to you how important we are. Platinum is not a common mineral in terms of its qualities. And for you to appreciate how important it is, I must highlight some of the qualities of platinum. If you take a platinum metal and put it in the soil for as long as you want, 60 years, 100 years, 150 years, and then you take it out of the soil, you will find that the metal is as clean as you put it in the soil in the first place, because it doesn't tarnish. In other words, and there are very few metals that survive in the soil. So that's quality number 1. Quality number 2, if you take platinum metal and you put it in acid, sulfuric acid, hydrochloric acid, or whatever acid of your choice, it will survive in acid. In fact, it is not affected by acid. There are very few metals that survive in acid. That gives you an indication of how important this mineral is. And thirdly, if you take platinum metal, put it in the fire with the intention of changing its shape, like we do with Simbi iron. If you want to make a whore or an X, you put the iron in the fire, and then you take a hammer and shape it to the shape you want. But you don't do that with platinum, because platinum is very stubborn. You put it in the fire, it does not feel heat until you generate a lot of heat, at least 1,768 degrees centigrade. So these qualities are very important for you to appreciate how important it is, because if you have these qualities, you can imagine to what uses platinum is put because of these rare qualities. The major use of platinum in the world is production of what are called autocatalysts. Autocatalysts or catalytic converters. These are units made out of platinum, out of palladium or rhodium, which are fixed to the exhaust system of vehicles in order to clean the poisonous air that comes from engines. So you will find that these autocatalysts now are a requirement by many countries that produce vehicles. They require that each vehicle be equipped with catalytic converters. What they do is, as the engine is running, the gases which are poisonous that come out of the engine, the carbon monoxide, the hydrocarbons that come from the engine, are then processed by these autocatalysts to produce more friendly gases like water vapor, like nitrogen, and like carbon dioxide. So eventually, the gases that come out of the vehicle are more friendly than the original gases produced by the engines. So that's the major use of platinum today. And Zimbabwe, being one of the largest reserves of platinum and its PGMs, Zimbabwe should aim to be the major center for production of autocatalysts or catalytic converters. But of course, you know that platinum is used in many other industries. You find drugs that are made out of platinum. You find platinum is also used in the production of jewelry. You know, not for poor women, but for those women who are lucky to be married by the rich. And I think in Zimbabwe there are very few. So we produce our platinum in order to make jewelry for the white people who are richer than us. Jewelry is also used to produce in hard disk drives and many other uses. It's a very important mineral. But I think what we should know about, our day-to-day uses of platinum, because it is a special mineral, one of the very, very few minerals that can stay in your body without causing problems, you find that any piece of metal that is introduced into your body by doctors is actually an alloy of platinum. And when you go to the doctor with a broken leg, they will put a metal plate in your leg in order to facilitate healing. That plate is platinum in it. It is one of those metals, very few metals that can stay in your body without causing problems. And so you find things like catheters. The tube that is implanted into your skin in order to facilitate discharge of waste, catheter. That is platinum. And the material that is put in your jaw by dentists in order to close windows or holes in your teeth, there has to be platinum in that substance. So those are some of the day-to-day uses of platinum. And so it plays a very important role. But the unfortunate thing about our platinum is that it is being mined by people who don't believe in building refineries in this country in order for us to sell the platinum to the international market directly. So you will find that most of the companies that produce platinum send the ore to South Africa for processing. So, and when the platinum has been processed, it is then sold on the international market as a South African product. So in fact, if you want to do a bit of research, you will find that Zimbabwe is not known as a producer of platinum because we are not registered as a marketer of platinum. And this is why government is now insisting that these platinum producers must build refineries here so that we beneficiate the platinum and be able to get much more money from our platinum. Because we are not processing our platinum, we are not known as a producer or a marketer of platinum. South Africa markets the platinum on our behalf. And so the statistics indicate that South Africa produces 81% of the world's platinum. A good part of that 81% is Zimbabwean product. We should be aware that there is need for these companies to be persuaded to build refineries here. I think the pressure from government has now started producing results, because we hear them talk about, resuscitating base metal, refiners, and so on and so on. So we hope that in the next few years we'll have refineries that will produce, that will beneficiate platinum to a certain level so that we get more money. One thing I didn't indicate to you was that apart from the fact that platinum is actually part of a group of 6 minerals, I should indicate that where you find PGMs, platinum group metals, you also find other minerals like nickel, like zinc, like gold, and so on and so on. So platinum mines are very rich, because where you find a platinum mine, you may actually come up with 10 minerals, 11 minerals, which are then processed and sold as separate minerals. And that process is done in South Africa. We need to insist on our platinum being processed here. You find situations where Russia, despite the fact that Russia is the 3rd largest reserve of platinum, they have come here to mine platinum. I think you know that there's a major project around Darendale where Russia is going to be producing platinum. What we should know about platinum is that the mineral platinum itself is mostly concentrated in South Africa and Zimbabwe. You know, in countries like Russia, then you find more palladium and other PGMs than platinum. So that difference must be clarified. The other mineral that I want to talk about a little for you to appreciate our importance as a country is chrome. Bartholomew says we are the largest reserve of chrome in the world, and South Africa is the 2nd largest reserve of chrome. And between us, South Africa and Zimbabwe, we control over 90% of the world's chrome. That is the same percentage in terms of control of platinum. South Africa and Zimbabwe control over 90% of the world's platinum. So these two strategic minerals, chrome and platinum, are mainly in South Africa and Zimbabwe. Chrome is a very important strategic mineral, especially to countries such as the United States, China, and other developed countries, because chrome is a major substance in terms of the material that is used to build warships. Warships are those huge vessels that ply the oceans, whose job is to distribute weapons of war, deadly equipment, to where wars are taking place. And with countries like the United States, which find wars fashionable, warships are very important. And yet they have no chrome. So they get all their chrome from Zimbabwe and from South Africa and build warships. And that's why if you had to tell the United States that you are not going to give them chrome today, they would beat you up in order to access your chrome. They love our chrome because it is the only product that they can use to produce warships. And of course, you know that chrome is also a very important product in stainless steel. And the stainless steel is the product that you know which is used to produce a lot of many steel products. Chrome is also used in the production of what are called gas turbine engines. These engines are used in rockets and other sophisticated equipment which is used by industrialized countries. So we look at ourselves as poor countries when in actual fact we are the source of these useful minerals that are highly valued in the world. If you go back to 1965, what happened in this country? Who remembers from your history? 1965, what major thing happened in this country? UDI, yeah. UDI means Unilateral Declaration of Independence. This is Ian Smith, who was the ruler of this country, who decided to break away from British control and unilaterally declared that he was independent. The British government then decided Ian Smith must be put under sanctions, and they went to the United Nations and persuaded the United Nations to introduce sanctions against Rhodesia. And the United Nations imposed sanctions on Rhodesia, chrome being one of the products under sanctions. In response, the United States went to the United Nations and said, if you want us to cooperate with you on sanctions, Rhodesian sanctions, then you must remove chrome from the list of sanctions because we cannot do without Rhodesian chrome. And United States, using its might and power, basically told the United Nations to remove chrome from the list of sanctions. And the United Nations removed chrome from the list of sanctions. That's how important it is to the United States. Chrome was never under sanctions for the whole period of the Rhodesian sanctions, 1965 to 1980. Huh? That's how important chrome is to the Americans. It is also so important, even today, that in the security sector of the United States, there are fears that there may come a time when the United States is unable to access Zimbabwean chrome, South African chrome. And in this respect, we have an Air Force officer of the United States Air Force who wrote an article a few years ago predicting a war over the strategic resources of Southern Africa. He says, for the last 1 century, the West had no problem accessing chrome, accessing platinum, and other strategic resources that are found in Southern Africa because the West were the colonizers of the region. And, but the situation has changed since independence because they are no longer in control of the governments of Southern Africa. And in fact, there is also a new group of countries that has become a threat to the West in terms of access to these strategic resources of Southern Africa. And this group of countries is called the BRICS. And who can tell me what BRICS mean? BRICS, what does it mean? Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And I must mention that including South Africa in the BRICS is a diplomatic strategy that is meant to convince or to appreciate Africans. We must feel that we belong to important groups in the world. South Africa is not as rich as the 4 other countries, the BRIC countries. If you look at the GDP of South Africa in comparison with the other 4, it's much smaller. But it's good we are included in the BRICS. Now, the threat is that the BRICS are countries that are competing with the Western countries in terms of access to the strategic resources of Southern Africa, the chrome, the platinum, manganese, the rare earth minerals, and so on. So this Air Force officer is saying, if the United States, for example, fails to access chrome or platinum or manganese or rare earth minerals of Southern Africa, they will go to war for these resources. And of course, you know what happens when two bulls are fighting. What happens? It is the grass that suffers, and we are the grass. So you must be alive to the implications of having these well sought after minerals. You must be alive to the fact that chrome is not a common product. You must be alive to the fact that platinum is not a common product, that manganese is not a common product. There are products that are found specifically in your region. And the implications of that are that the other countries in the world want to control your politics. They want to control the production of these minerals so that they can keep a standard of living that they have maintained over a period of time. We should go back to history and know that these strategic resources have been the raw materials of Western industries. It is these raw materials of our countries which have made white people rich. Because if you really have to go down to doing an analysis of what makes Western Europe a rich region, you can only conclude that they are rich and they are leading a high standard of living because they colonized us. It was from their colonial exploits that they became rich, because their countries are not gifted with minerals. There are no diamonds there. There's no platinum there. There's no chrome there. Very little gold, if any. And so you wonder why they are richer than us. They are not richer. We are richer than them. But they use our resources to maintain that standard of living. And the implications are political. Because they used our resources to create a high standard of living, they want to maintain that high standard of living even today. And therefore, to be able to continue to do that, they want to keep us as the suppliers of raw materials who don't benefit from the raw materials. And they do the processing of these minerals and maintain a rich standard of living. So that basically is the reason why there is continuous conflict between us and Western Europe. For us to be independent and for us to benefit from our minerals, we have to make sure that we take charge of these resources. But Western Europe knows that if we do that, they lose out. So there's this constant tussle between us. That is what we know as international politics. The other minerals that I want to highlight in respect of Zimbabwe include gold. You know, gold is perhaps the most important mineral in Zimbabwe, now and in the past. Today, if you ask the Minister of Finance how much money we get from gold, he will tell you that over 47% of money coming from minerals comes from gold. And yet we have got these big minerals like diamonds, like platinum, like chrome. But gold is a mineral which is associated with Zimbabwe from a very far back. You go into the Bible, read the Bible. King Solomon, is there a book by King Solomon in the Bible? No? Huh? Songs of Solomon. In the Bible, you will find that they talk about a country called Ophir. Ophir, some people call it Ophir. Now, this country is written 12 times in the Bible, 12 times. And this is the country from which King Solomon, the king of the Jews, imported gold. The gold that he used to decorate his temple, which he built in Jerusalem. Now, researchers have been trying to understand this country called Ophir. What is it called today? And they have been brainstorming over the years. At some point, they agreed, or they almost agreed, that Ophir could be India, could be Arabia, could be Zimbabwe. And there was confusion over the next few years. But today, there is a research organization called PIRC, Phoenician International Research Center, which is based in the Middle East. This organization is saying the countries of India and Arabia could not be the Ophir of ancient times because there is no evidence that there was any serious gold mining taking place in those countries during King Solomon's time. They argue very strongly that the country you know as Zimbabwe today, Munumtapa's country, is the Ophir of ancient times. And in their desperation to convince us, they actually say if you go to Zimbabwe, you will find places with names like Mfure or Mount Fura. That Fu is an indication that the country was called Ophir. So, according to the Phoenician International Research Center, the country called Ophir in the Bible is the country called Zimbabwe today. This is Munumtapa's country, which has been associated with gold mining from before Jesus Christ. Zimbabwe has been associated with gold mining for a very long time. We were known for gold mining before Jesus Christ because King Solomon was an ancestor of Jesus Christ, and he was buying gold from Zimbabwe. In fact, researchers will tell you that Zimbabwe was the largest producer of gold between the 7th century and the 19th century. So in fact, the period 600 AD to 1890, that period was a period associated with Zimbabwe producing the largest amount of gold. They say between those two centuries, 7th century to the 19th century, the world produced 2,100 tons of gold. And out of that, Zimbabwe produced 700 tons, which means Zimbabwe was producing a third of the world's gold. If you look around in the country, you visit various parts of the country, look for round holes on rocks. Pamaware, you see those round holes? We call mativi. What do you think those are associated with? What are those? Mativi are reported to be the industry, you know, the factories of gold production. They would process the gold in the round holes, and you find them everywhere in this country. And if you go to the national museums and monuments, they will show you samples of the quality of gold that came from these round holes on rocks. High level of purity. And that's how our ancestors were processing gold. It is also said when the white men came here in 1890, they found a lot of gold mines scattered throughout the country. And they didn't have to prospect for gold because all they did, there's evidence that the mines that they then worked were adjacent to old ancient dumps where our ancestors were mining gold. And you read books by some of those people that were part of the pioneer column, which basically says when they arrived in Harare, in Solveri, the first thing they did was to go on a gold hunt. And he mentions places like Gadzema, indicating, you know, just giving examples of some of the mines that they found in the country. Some of the old mines like Jumbo in Mazowe. From description, you can tell that places like Eiffel Flats, you know, around Kadoma. These are old mines, gold mines, which were worked by our ancestors. And there's a story about Globe and Phoenix mine, which you find in Kwekwe, to the effect that in 1888, two white people were looking for old mines in the area around Kwekwe. And they were shown the mine of Globe and Phoenix by one of the Africans that they found in the area, in the general area. He took them to Globe and Phoenix mine, and when they entered Globe and Phoenix mine, they found that the mine had been worked 25 meters deep. And they also went to another mine next to Globe and Phoenix, I think it's Kaika mine. They found a lot of gold there. And by way of thanking the black man, they gave him 2 blankets for showing them these beautiful mines. Now, what is important about Globe and Phoenix mine is that you read that when they started working on Globe and Phoenix mine, producing gold from that mine, it became such an important producer in terms of amounts of gold, to the extent that the Chancellor of the Exchequer of Britain was a board member of Globe and Phoenix mine. Now, it tells you exactly where the money that developed Britain came from. And I advise Zimbabweans that when they go to London, they should walk with a very straight face, and they should not look down, because they should feel confident that it is their country which built all these beautiful buildings. They benefited from our mines. The history of gold mining in Zimbabwe is well documented. You go to archives, you ask the director there to show you a book which was written by a white lady, which shows the various places where gold mining was taking place in this country, as far back as King Solomon's times. So, Zimbabwe is the only country out of the 3 that shows evidence of serious gold mining in ancient times. If you go to the coast of East Africa, you find old cities that were associated with the trading in gold. These are Kilwa. Kilwa, I think, is in Tanzania, was it? Kenya. In Tanzania. And in Mozambique, you find the cities of Sofala. And you remember Sofala was the seaport of Munumtapa. Cities like Manyikeni. These are cities that are known for trading in gold. But there's no gold on the East Coast. All the gold that they were trading in was coming from the Zimbabwe plateau, from here, 1,500 kilometers away. And so Zimbabwe is a very well-known country in terms of gold production. You remember, this is the reason why the Portuguese tried to colonize this country. They wanted our gold. The British came here basically because they wanted to control us, control the gold production. The story that you know about Cecil Rhodes, who after the Boers had controlled gold discoveries in the Transvaal, he believed that in Mashonaland there is even more gold. And that's why he sent the pioneer column here. So the history of this country is closely associated with the history of gold mining. Anyway, the important thing we should know today is that Zimbabwe is the largest spread of gold. There is no country with similar spread. In this country, you don't find a district without gold. And that is not a phenomenon you will find in any other country. South Africa might have had produced more gold in the recent past than Zimbabwe. But if you go to South Africa, you don't find gold in every district. You find it in specific areas. But Zimbabwe, wherever you go, there is gold. And that's why it has been very difficult even for the West to administer sanctions against us. Because when you have gold everywhere, your people don't starve. They go into gold production. They are poor only in the morning. In the evening, after they have done the gold mining and they've sold a few grams, they are rich. They go to the bar, drink beer, buy mealie meal for the family to feed. And as you know in life, if you have sadza, nemurivo, nedoro, life is complete. And so it doesn't matter how much sanctions you try and impose on a country with gold, these sanctions may not work because people have alternatives in terms of means of sustenance. And that's why we have survived the brutalizing sanctions that the West has imposed on us. It's because we have access to gold, and gold is everywhere. So that, I think, is a blessing for us, and it's not a phenomenon you can associate with any other country. There are other minerals like lithium. Now, I think lithium is the mineral of the times. People are talking about the importance of lithium now, but we've been talking about it for a long time. Lithium is the lightest metal. If you take lithium metal and put it in water, it will float because it has no weight. Now, its strength comes from the fact that it has no weight. And they discovered that that weightlessness makes it a very good product in terms of storing energy. So it stores a lot of energy in very small places. And because of that quality, they made the lithium carbonate battery. And these are special batteries, very recently produced batteries, which have revolutionized the industry. Because when they produced these lithium carbonate batteries, the small battery that you can charge, this battery replaced the huge batteries that were made out of nickel. And if you remember, in the 80s and perhaps the 90s, computers used to be big machines. And they were big machines because they used huge batteries made out of nickel. Now, the lithium carbonate battery, the powerful battery made out of lithium, replaced the nickel battery, and the computer became a very small machine. Today, you find the computer is the size of a bag. What do you call them? Laptops. Yeah, laptops. It is the lithium carbonate battery that has reduced the size of computers. And it is also the lithium carbonate battery that has made it possible to produce the cell phone. Cell phones use a very small battery made out of lithium. And the video cameras have become smaller and smaller. And lithium has become more important in other ways. When you want to reduce the weight of something, you simply add lithium. And when you mix lithium with aluminum, for example, like they do in the aeronautical industry of the United States, if they want to reduce the size or the weight of rockets, for example, they mix lithium with aluminum, and that reduces the weight of the machine. For example, American rockets have lost about 3,000 kilograms of weight by simply making the storage tanks of fuel for the fuel tanks of the rockets by making them out of lithium together with aluminum. That reduces the weight. So even vehicles today, if you have to reduce their weight, they simply mix, metals together with lithium. So it's becoming more and more important a product. And since lithium carbonate battery was introduced, the price of lithium has risen 5 times. This means that countries with a lot of lithium are bound to make a lot of money out of their lithium. Now, Zimbabwe is a country with a lot of lithium, and you find lithium in over 30 places in this country. 30 places. But most of these are not yet surveyed. We don't know much about them. You've heard about Kamativi. You've heard about places outside Harare where there's lithium. But the most well-known source of lithium in Zimbabwe is Bikita Minerals. And Bikita Minerals is a very unassuming place between Masvingo and Bikita. It is a mine which is well known in the United States. It's a mine which is well known in the world. Only Zimbabweans don't know much about it. When you read about Bikita Minerals, the white people tell you that Bikita is the giant Bikita deposit of lithium. Giant, meaning a huge source of lithium. But the most important thing about the Bikita lithium is its quality. They describe it as high quality, which is unusual, which means it is rare in terms of, its quality. And they compare the quality of the Bikita lithium only to 2 other places in the world. There is a place in Australia called Green Bushes. It produces high quality of lithium, as high as the quality of Bikita. And then another place in Canada, which is called Bannock Lake. These 3 places produce the best lithium in the world. Now, the important thing about Bikita lithium is that they say the American Energy Commission, right? This is the government department that sends rockets to the moon. There's a stockpile of lithium hydroxide. In that stockpile, Bikita lithium constitutes 30%. 30%. Or at least this was the position some time back. We don't know what the current situation is, but Bikita used to constitute 30% of the lithium hydroxide that you found in the stockpile of the American Energy Commission. And they were using this lithium to produce what are called rocket propellants, which are the machines that throw the rockets into the air to go to the moon and other places in the sky. So we are a very important country in terms of supplying the best quality of lithium to the United States. And like I've always said, if you are a small country with a highly attractive resource like lithium, If you try and deny them access to this resource, they will beat you up. And that's why it's important for us to grow as a country, to make sure that we produce children, not in small numbers, but in high numbers, so that our population increases. And that way we are able to come up with a security system that can protect our natural resources. So it doesn't matter what resources we have, as long as we have no means to defend them, they can always be taken away from us. And we should be aware of that. The solution is in numbers. We need numbers. Because there is no benefit in being small. Britain is a country which is only 2/3 of Zimbabwe, but it has a population of over 65 million. And because they have a population of over 65 million, they can afford the luxury of going around the world beating up people. Smaller than a country smaller than Zimbabwe, it is a world power in terms of military capacity. It's out of people. So Africa must wake up to its problems and understand that small populations are actually a liability. You must produce children and create big populations. There are many other minerals. I talked about methane gas. I talked about mtorolite and so on and so on. But I think we should be satisfied about the fact that we belong to that region which is highly attractive in terms of being the reserve of strategic minerals. The former colonizers assessed that the other countries which they gave independence without a fight, they thought they were not rich. But no, they didn't know that they were extremely rich. Today you find oil has been discovered in many parts of Africa, including places like Mozambique, Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda. All these countries, you now find a lot of oil in those places. And in terms of oil production, in terms of oil reserves, Africa is growing in its importance, and the United States is turning to Africa as a source of oil. So the importance of our riches as a region, as a continent, is growing. In terms of food production, Sub-Saharan Africa is rated to be the most important producer of food for the world. 66% of land that is good for production of food throughout the year is in Africa. The climate is good. We don't have temperatures that go too low. We don't have temperatures that are too hot to live in. And Zimbabwe, by the way, is one of the best climates. In fact, if you want to live in the best country in terms of climate, you come to Zimbabwe. The best country in terms of soils. You read about countries that produce beef. Zimbabwe is the tastiest, what do you call it? Tastiest, yeah? Tastiest beef, because the grass in our country is described as sweet felt. Yeah? And so we produce the best meat. If you go to places like America, the first thing they ask you is, oh, you come from Zimbabwe. Have you been to Victoria Falls? You say yes. How is the beef? Eh? Because the beef, Zimbabwean beef is unique. So, we are the best country in the world.
Thank you you very much for the enlightening presentation. I'm really challenged to venture into mining now because we are very rich. But my question is, on the mineral you mentioned like platinum. I understand you said it has got some other minerals within it. So it being mined from Zimbabwe, how are we going to fully benefit from it? Because some they will just declare the platinum yet not declaring other minerals found in it. So for us to have full value from that mineral, what policies are being formulated such that we benefit fully from it?
Thank you very much. It's difficult for me to tell you exactly how the ore that is exported for processing to South Africa, how government treats it in terms of assessing the various components in the ore, and how government charges the mining company in terms of the various minerals that are contained in the ore. But what I know is that before platinum ore is exported to South Africa for processing, government takes a sample. You remember what they do is to take the platinum ore and just remove the waste, remain with what is called matte. And that matte, you know, from each lorry that is driven to South Africa, government takes a sample, puts it in the laboratory to assess how much platinum is there. I don't know if they go to the extent of also determining how much palladium is there, how much rhodium is there, how much iridium, osmium, gold, you know, and all those various minerals. I'm not too well versed in that. But on the basis of those samples, the percentages that they come up with as they assess in the laboratory, then government is able to perhaps ask for a certain amount of money from the mining company. That's what we benefit from the company. But the processing itself is done in South Africa, and then they are able to say, we've got so many grams of gold, so many ounces of palladium, nickel, and so on and so on. That is done in South Africa. And whether this mining company has an obligation to declare to the government of Zimbabwe, we don't know. But what we know is that once the processes have been done in terms of refining the ore, the product is then sold by the South Africans, and the money goes to South Africa and doesn't come here, doesn't come here. So I think government is aware of the disadvantages of the current system, and that's why they are insisting on you know, coming up with refineries here. I think the first step is to build what are called base metal refineries, which will extract gold. They will maybe not gold, but the other minerals, you know, like nickel and so on, so that they don't go to South Africa for processing. And then later, those refineries that process the precious minerals like platinum, like rhodium, iridium, can come later. But clearly, it is unfair for gold to accompany platinum undeclared. If we have processes in the country to make sure that at least those other minerals remain here, it would help. So I cannot answer your question fully because I'm not fully aware of the processes and how government does it together with the mining company. Okay.
Thank you so much for the well-researched presentation. I'm Alice Shagata, studying Film and Theatre Arts at Midland State University. My question is, how much has the SADC region covered in terms of geological survey techniques?
I don't know. The one problem we have in Southern Africa, in Zimbabwe specifically, and I think Garikai Chengu, who I quoted, is saying Zimbabwe is the richest country in terms or in respect of untapped natural resources. Garikai Chengu has actually written a paper, highlighting the problem of our country not being able to allocate sufficient resources to do exploration. He says the government allocates about 1% of the budget towards exploration, and it's not enough for us to be able to know what we have in terms of minerals and so on and so on. So I would think that one of the problems in Southern Africa is the fact that we have not allocated sufficient resources to exploration. And these problems are because of the fact that we may not have sufficient resources to make that a priority. So it is a problem. The problem of exploration in terms of capacity, technically, we have to get assistance from foreign countries, and they come with their terms, and sometimes it becomes very difficult to be able to allocate the necessary resources for us to understand what we have. So I don't know, but Southern Africa, I think in terms of exploration, that could be a general problem, except perhaps South Africa, which is a more advanced economy. But you find countries like the DRC, I would assume they have the same problem with us, where insufficient resources are allocated for exploration. But I think from now onwards, exploration must be a priority, and our governments must give sufficient resources for that. In Zimbabwe, I think you are aware that there's a company that has been recently formed. I don't know whether it's a parastatal but it's some government institution that has been formed to focus on exploration. I think that's very important. We hope government will give it sufficient resources to be able to do enough exploration. Okay. Another question?
Thank you very much, sir. I'm Joy Jama from Zimbabwe Heritage Trust. I'm an intern with the organization. Since you've mentioned that the SADC region is a very wealthy region, I wanted to know what measures are being taken or being put in place to assure the security of the region against maybe a potential scramble.
I think it's a very important question because, like I indicated, Southern Africa is a very rich region of the world, and when you are rich, in most cases, a lot of people from outside want to share those riches with you or to take them away from you completely without you benefiting. But you must look at the history of the region. I think we have been discussing the fact that Southern Africa is the only region in Africa which had to go to war in order to be independent. I've been saying this several times. So we became independent out of liberation struggles. We lost lives in order to be independent. But that experience also taught us to appreciate the fact that we have enemies and permanent enemies who will continue to make sure that we are disadvantaged as far as our resources are concerned. So, in fact, the liberation parties that are ruling Southern Africa are an educated group of political parties that know their enemy very well. And in this respect, we cannot shy away from the fact that our enemies come from the West, because they were our colonizers. We know them, we know their intentions. And just the experience of going through the liberation struggle has taught the parties that rule Southern Africa to watch out for the enemy. And the example I always give is our involvement in the DRC. When the West sponsored Uganda and Rwanda to remove Laurent Kabila's government in Kinshasa, the SADC region got involved together with the DRC government to make sure that they did not succeed. You don't find that in many places of the world where the regional grouping ensures security for the various members of the region. We did that because we know that the enemy of DRC is also our enemy. The enemy of South Africa is our enemy. So if anything happens, if there is a war that is started by the enemy in any part of the region, the regional countries get involved and they go there physically to make sure that the enemy does not succeed. I think that is an internal mechanism in the region which we have adopted out of the experience of the liberation struggle. And that is why the West has identified the liberation movements as enemies who must be removed from power. Hence the regime change agenda, which is taking place in Zimbabwe, in South Africa, in Mozambique, in Angola. All liberation parties are under attack. It may not be at the same level of intensity from country to country, but the West does not appreciate liberation parties because they are conscious parties. They have been enemies before and they will remain enemies. They want to remove them. And the whole idea why the West wants to have these parties removed from power is because they control these strategic minerals whose access they would want to enjoy all the time. So the way to answer your question is that former liberation movements are alert and they will ensure that there is no second wave of colonization. And perhaps to answer your question completely, the West is also aware that second round of colonization, physical colonization, may not be in sync with modern behavior. And so that's why the West has adopted strategies of creating political organizations who are puppets of the West. They promote them to eventually take over the administration in the various countries in the region. So you find the region is what are called labor parties, right? And most of these labor parties were formed by the former colonizers. And they are funded in order for them to take over government in the various parts of the region. So this situation in Southern Africa where you find labor parties being the opposition parties who are funded by the West to take over from the nationalist parties that brought independence is actually the Western attempt to continue neo-colonialism. That is neo-colonialism. When you don't want to take control of government physically, but you have a puppet who is serving your interests. And that's the major political phenomenon in Southern Africa. We have puppet government, puppet parties, like the MDC. Right? The MDC is a puppet government, a puppet party that was created by Britain. This is fact. It was created by the Westminster Foundation for Democracy in 1999 in order to remove ZANU-PF from power so that they serve the interests of Britain. And that is the struggle we have today. They pose as genuine political parties that seek power, when in actual fact they're doing it on behalf of the enemy. Yeah. You answered?
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Thank you, sir. I'm Big Boy Guara from the University of Zimbabwe. My question is, if we have all those minerals in Zimbabwe, why we are still poor?
Thank you very much. I think it's a very important question. Africa is the richest continent. It is the largest reserve of various minerals, natural resources, but it is the poorest people in the world. It's a phenomenon that we have to fight. The reason is basically because the reason is historical. During colonialism, the West was not developing our countries using the natural resources that they were exploiting. They were developing their own countries. And today, the situation has not changed. When we took over government after independence, we did not have the personnel to be able to work on these mines to produce wealth for us. We did not have the capital, and that remains the same basically. Today, even after 40, 50 years of independence. I'm talking about it's an African phenomenon. So we suffer from ignorance in terms of how to exploit our minerals. We also suffer from lack of resources to develop these mines and benefit from them. But also, the West, like I indicated, the kind of relationship between us and the West is that of a ride and horse. They've created conditions that make us the source of raw materials for their industries. And so, if you want to maintain good relations with the governments of the West, you must be a puppet. You must not be aggressive in terms of coming up with policies that make you an independent country that runs its own resources. So, what lacks in Africa are those things: resources, knowledge, and the courage to come up with policies that say we are going to be in charge of our resources. And so the West comes here, invests, you know, they exploit our minerals, and they take the proceeds from there, leaving us with the holes. That situation has not changed much in Africa. So Africa needs to work on those three things: resources to be able to develop our mines. We must send people for training to friendly people to know more about platinum, about diamonds, and about chrome, and how to exploit it, so that we can then ask friends to come and set up refineries in our countries. And when we sell those minerals in a processed form, beneficiated form, our people benefit. So basically, that's the reason. I don't know if I have answered you correctly, but Africa needs to have a sting that persuades them to come up with policies that say, if you are not going to give us 51%, like we have done in this country, where we say, in terms of diamonds and platinum, we would demand 51%, 50%, or something like that. That way, a good share of the proceeds from our minerals will remain here to develop the people, develop the economy.